For today's lesson, our focus standard comes from Grade 8, Statistics and Probability, Standard 3, Use and Interpret the Equation of a Linear Model to Analyze Bivariate Data. Our topic for this lesson comes from Data and Statistics, Finding Slope given 2 data points. Our essential question is, how do we calculate the slope of a trend line from 2 data points? Please take a moment, pausing the video if you need to copy down the standard, the topic, and essential question, along with today's date in your header, set up your question column and your note column, and resume the video when you're ready to begin.
So this topic, I'm going to break this down, we're going to look at this. It's going to relate to our Thinking with Mathematical video, 2.1 video on slope-intercept equations for linear graphs. I actually talked about how to draw a trend line and write an equation for that trend line from the graph, and you may want to refer back to that. This video is going to help you again with a trend line, but to do it all from formulas if you're given 2 data points. So you could do this on a graph, but this will help us be more accurate and to actually calculate it out using some formulas. So I just want to make sure I'm really clear about that as we go, but you may want to review this and your notes on this as you will see how it pertains. So how do we find the slope of a trend line given 2 points? So here's our example. We're being asked to find the slope of the trend line that crosses through the points 35, 7 and 10, 20. So up until now, when given a problem like this, I've told you to just graph those 2 points on a line, or graph them onto a XY axis, and then go through the steps like I showed you in these notes here to find the slope and write the equation. But there is a formula for it. So we're going to go through those steps here. So the first step is to order the points as 0.1 and 0.2. So these, we want to order them as 0.1 and 0.2, but we have to do that by the value of their x coordinate. Okay? So that is really important. We don't get to just choose which one is which. The point that has the lowest x value will be 0.1, and the point with the highest x value will be 0.2. So remember, in an ordered pair, x comes first and y comes second. So we are looking at 35 and 10. Since 10 is the lowest x value of these 2 points, this is going to be 0.1, and 35, 7 is going to be 0.2. So I've written that here. So because 10 is a lower x value than 35, 10, 20 becomes our 0.1, and 35, 7 becomes our 0.2. So now we want to order the coordinates according to their point number. This is just taking it a step further, but I like to break it down into its own step. So here we said 0.1 was 10, 20. So that means 10 is going to be the x sub 1, and 20 is going to be y sub 1, because we're going to use these values in a formula, but it's important that we use them in the correct order. So 10 is x sub 1, and 20 is y sub 1, because they come from 0.1. And 35, 7, 35 is going to be x sub 2, and 7 is going to be y sub 2. Again, just noticing that that's telling us that it's the x and y coordinates from 0.2. So now that we've decided which one is 0.1 and which one is 0.2, and we've labeled their x and y values accordingly, now we are ready for the equation. So here is the formula. We plug the values from the 2 points into the formula. M, which is telling us our slope value, equals, and this is still the change in y over the change in x, the rise over the run, but now we have a way to calculate it just given the values. So y sub 2, right, minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 and x sub 1. So that gives us our change in y over our change in x, and now we have a way to calculate it. So I've gone ahead and shown what that would look like. Here's my equation. I kept the color coding to show you where these values are coming from. So 7 was our y value from our second point, and we're subtracting 20, which is our y value from our first point, in our numerator, and in our denominator we're taking 35, which is our x value from our second point, and 10, which is our x value from our first. I like that they're stacked up, so you should see the 7 over the x of the same point minus the y of the first value over the x from the second value. Those should line up from one ordered pair. And when we take 7 minus 20, we get negative 13. When we take 35 minus 10, we get 25. So you can leave it as this, but regardless of whether the negative ends up in the numerator or the denominator, it makes the whole fraction negative, so I like to put it out like this. Negative 13/25 in its fraction form. Or sometimes we know that if we take this numerator, negative 13 divided by 25, we can turn it into its decimal form, and in that case that would be negative 0 52/100. Alright, so those are the 3 steps of how to find the slope when you're just given 2 points. Even if you were given those 2 points on a graph, you could draw the slope triangle, or you could simply use this formula and come up with the slope value. This is going to be the first part, right, of how to calculate this. We're going to put it all together to be able to write a whole equation, but this is just focusing on how to find the slope. Now I want to just compare that for you to a graph, because up until now we've been only finding the slope from a graph. So here I have the data. It was 3 points, A, B, and C, that were on this graph, but we wanted to find what is the slope of the line going through A and B. So B ended up being our second point, 35/7, and A was our first point, 10/20. That's in order as their x values. And then I just drew here the red triangle. This would be our slope triangle, right? So you can see it's dropping, right? From here down, from left to right, it's dropping. So we expect a negative rise. So it was a difference of 13. Knowing that this value is 7, up to 20 is 13. And then from 10 over to 35, that gave us a run of 25. So that negative 13 over 25, right? And I wrote that out here as well. So when we change that fraction into a decimal, we get 0 52/100, negative 0 52/100. So just showing you a comparison of what we just did mathematically using a formula is still the same as when we use a slope triangle to find the rise over run. Still the change in y, which is our rise, over the change in x, which is our run. So the last thing you'll want to do is read over, highlight things as you need to, maybe rewatch any part of it that may have been confusing, and then please go ahead and write a summary of this video and begin writing your study guide questions in the question column.